Welcome. I'm joined today by David Dye, a friend of mine and an author of several books. We're going to talk today about the newest book, Courageous Cultures. But I am just so delighted to be building relationships during COVID, and it just seems like as COVID has happened and we're all sheltering in place, people are reaching out to each other, and we're starting to see these themes and these partnerships come alive. So, David, I am so glad that you're here sharing your time and your expertise at a time when we really need to hear these kinds of messages.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Nate.
Yeah. Well, first of all, since we're going to talk about your book today, could you share us a little bit about kind of your journey, the focus of your company, and what led up to this book, why it's kind of so important right now?
Sure, it's a great question. And skipping to the end, we didn't know how important it was going to be right now when we set out to write it. But we've been in the leadership development space for several years. And 4 years ago, we published Winning Well, a manager's guide to getting results without losing your soul. And it's written primarily for frontline and middle level leaders, although executives benefit from it as well, with a great focus on how you practically, day to day, with all the things that leaders and managers have to do every day, achieve the breakthrough results that you want to achieve without sacrificing your humanity or losing your mind in the process. And so it was really a compendium of Karen Hurt, my partner, co-author, and wife, of the two of us, of all of the things that we had learned in our careers and been teaching and sharing with leaders. Well, as we've been out doing the work with organizations around the world, about 4 or 5 years ago, we recognized a pattern that was happening. And it was that we would talk with senior leaders and we'd hear a common refrain. Why am I the one that has to come up with all the solutions around here? Why aren't my people seeing these problems? Why aren't my managers seeing issues and addressing them? Why aren't people speaking up with solutions for customers and advocating for customers and things that are going to make our business better and make their life better? And it was interesting because in those organizations, we would go and work with frontline teams. And from them, what's coming. We would hear, no one really wants to hear my idea. They're not going to take it seriously. They don't care what I have to say, that kind of thing. And we look at each other and go, are you guys working in the same organization? And so we saw this disparity, this gap between, leaders want ideas,
Yeah.
and strategically they know they need to have them and get those solutions. And people have ideas, but they're not necessarily sharing them. And so somewhere there's a breakdown. Well, so we partnered with the University of Northern Colorado, their social research lab, great organization, to do the quantitative research around it. And then we also did some qualitative case studies where we partnered with some organizations across a wide variety of industries, from healthcare to finance to defense contractors, and dove deep into best practices, what's working, what's not, how do organizations overcome those barriers. And Courageous Cultures is really the result of that research and that process and us answering that question and giving leaders a roadmap to build what we call a courageous culture. We can talk about what that looks like. But, the other reason that we wrote the book was because as we were looking ahead at the future of work, we've been working in a changing work environment for the last decade plus.
Yeah.
And the COVID and the pandemic has only accelerated it, where top-down leadership, it's not dead, but it's on its way out. And the problems that we have today as organizations, no one person can possibly solve them unless you're unless you're a one-person organization, but you really can't even then. They're bigger than any one of us. And so our ability to tap into the collective wisdom and creativity and problem solving of human beings as leaders, that's going to be the differentiator. That's going to be the competitive advantage. Anything that is commoditized, anything artificial intelligence can do, that's just going to be table stakes. What's going to be the differentiator are going to be the people. And so how, as leaders, do we bring people together and draw those ideas out and create a culture where people are not retreating into safe silence, but are consistently contributing? So that's in not so short a description of why we wrote the book.
Well, that's huge. And you're talking about a a change has been going on for a long time, but like you said, accelerated and really made visible right now. I don't remember who said this, but recently I heard somebody talking about, well, everything's going virtual, everything's automated. So like, what is going to be the role of people? We ask that periodically with robots and everything. And I
Mhm.
heard someone say the best distinction between what's going to be automated and what's not. And he said, the past, anything that can be repeated from the past will be automated, but humans are in charge of creating the future because they're the ones that are thinking and imagining and collaborating. But it comes back to the role of the leader to create a place and facilitate the place where the collective wisdom can create that future. So uh, tell me a little bit about why the word courageous. Why is that in the title? Why not productive or innovative or creative cultures?
Well, you might go with creative cultures, but some organizations, I'm thinking of one in particular, an engineering firm that we talk about in the book, and the CEO and the founder over decades. This firm does work, and without getting into their industry, the failure rate, I mean, you're into like the sixth or seventh decimal place. They have to have a 0.0000000.5 failure rate. I mean, their products cannot fail. And we were talking about creativity and taking risks and so forth in a team meeting, and he said, risk is for weekends. And everybody laughed because as conservative as he is in his approach to engineering and problem solving, on the weekends he rides a Harley, right? So
Right. Got to
that kind
get
of a
that need met somewhere.
somewhere. And but even there, right, even in those kinds of situations, or let's say flying an airplane, or
Mm-hmm.
in the operating theater where you have very low margins. I mean, there's margins and tolerances for risk everywhere. That's just the reality of life. But even in those environments, being able to raise your hand and speak up on behalf of the people in the cabin, the patient on the table, your fellow employees, what's right, right,
Mm-hmm.
or what's going to be effective, that takes courage. And there's some psychological reasons why that, diving into the research, and uh, you can't talk about this subject of psychological safety without mentioning Dr. Amy Edmondson. So she's a
Mm-hmm.
Novartis professor at Harvard, and she wrote the foreword to our book, but she wrote a book called The Fearless Organization. And she talks a lot about psychological safety. And, with your background, I'm sure you're familiar with these things. The um, overweighting negative experiences and the
Yeah.
tendency people have to do that, and then to discount the future,
Right.
and they'll underestimate the positive impact of the idea they could contribute. And so those are things that every human being is just kind of, by the way we're wired, right? We're bringing those into our interactions, our teamwork, and so forth. So even if you're a leader that is got a great heart and you're really wanting all that input from your team and you genuinely care and so forth, just creating permission isn't enough. It takes intentionality to overcome those barriers and create real psychological safety in a team. So the way Dr. Evanson says it is that she talked about the fearless organization in terms of that, what does the psychological safety look like? When we're talking about courage and a courageous culture, it's how practically do you as a leader
Mm.
build that? How do you get there with intention?
I I appreciate your distinction between fear and courage because sometimes we think of fear as the thing that holds us back, but courage is the thing that keeps us going even when we're afraid. So yeah, I might say, oh, it's okay for everyone to share. And by the way, I totally get why you would want a lot of creative input on how to get from the fifth decimal to the sixth decimal.
Heck
That's
yeah.
maybe where you need your biggest creative breakthroughs. Not that you're going to take all kinds of crazy risks and liberties, but that's also where you need innovation. Um,
Absolutely.
anything more you want to say about that difference between courage and fear, and why permission is not enough?
Yeah, I'm so glad you draw attention to that, because as we've been talking about the research and digging in and talking with leaders about all this, a common refrain that we would hear is, "Well, I have an open door. Everybody knows that I'm open to ideas." And the problem there is that that's a passive approach to leadership. You're expecting the best ideas to walk through your door. And so when we talk about fear, and the reason that that we talk about fear is it's easy for people to go, oh, I recognize that, but it really encompasses a lot more. I like to use the word
Mm.
reluctance.
Okay.
Okay, so we talk about FOSU, fear of speaking up. There's fear of missing out. So to have fun, FOSU, fear of speaking up. But
Right.
it's really a reluctance, and it's a reluctance based on a couple of things that we found. So sometimes it's people just don't think that their idea is going to be taken seriously. 50% of our respondents said, "Yeah, if I share something, it's not going to be taken seriously." 2/3 of the folks said, "You know, my management's stuck in their thinking, and this is the way that we've always done it. That's how they approach things. That's the way we're always going to do it." 49% of people said they're not regularly asked by their leader for their ideas. And so you get this kind of this culmination, this cocktail of different reasons that people are then reluctant. And it's taking a social risk.
Mm.
Am I going to be discounted? I'm comfortable now. Well, what's going to be the end state after I raise my hand? And so, our favorite definition of culture comes from Seth Godin. I love the way that he says it. He says, culture is people like us do things like this. That's all culture is. So the paradox of a courageous culture is it takes less courage for any individual to raise their hand if that's what everybody's doing. If that's the norm, that we all
Right.
speak up on behalf of our customer and solve problems and contribute our micro innovations. If everybody's doing that, that's the safer route. And so as a leader, that's what we want to create, is
Right.
that culture where consistent contribution is the norm. But the courage particularly comes in, and this book is written for leaders. The courage comes in because the leader has to go first. They have to take that initiative, and that does take courage.
Okay. So you've kind of helped us appreciate why we're not, or how we are not getting the full benefit of all of the people and the intelligence and the experience on our teams. And that's been a kind of a historic thing that we're trying to grow out of.
Mhm.
You've talked to us about there's this reluctance, and there's reasons for it. There's psychological reasons, there's maybe history, typical organizations, and that it's not enough to just give permission. So the leader has to go first. So tell us about that.
Yeah, there are a number of things that leaders can do. And so we lay out in the book, a 7-step process that leaders can follow. And obviously, won't go through all of those, but just a couple of key concepts. One is starting with yourself, and we call it navigating the narrative, which is thinking about your own journey and your own moments of courage. One of our favorite things to do with groups, both remote like this or in person, whenever that happens again, is to ask people about their most courageous moment in their career. And I mean, it is just spine tingling. We just literally 90 minutes ago, before I've hopped on this conversation with you, we were talking with a group, and some of the stories that people share, that people have courage, they have those moments. And so when we can ground ourselves as a leader in those moments that helped us realize what our values actually are, and when we were at our best self, to tap into those and then to step into those and use them again in these moments. And so starting with yourself, we call it navigate the narrative, but as you're starting with yourself, it's then you can even tap in and help your people to find their moments, the things that they're hopeful for, the things that are concerning them. And we have a technique we call a fear forage, where it's something that we kind of stumbled upon by accident, but working at a large tech company, and did this with a group of executives who there was a new initiative that was going on, and you have one of those conversations where you realize, like, we're not having the actual conversation that needs to be had here.
Yep.
So gave everybody a note card, and you can do this remotely, but we gave everybody a note card and said, on one side, write your biggest hope for this initiative, and on the other side, write your biggest fear, your biggest concern. And then we read them, and they were anonymous. And the hopes were a variety of different hopes depending on the role, but the fears, across 11, 12 executives, the fears were all aligned.
Really.
I'm concerned that the other people in this room aren't going to carry their weight and be committed to this initiative, and I'm going to be left out to dry. It was fascinating because once that was in the room, everybody realized they weren't alone. Everybody's got the same fears. And
Right.
then B, once the fear is known, then we can start to talk about it. So navigating your own narrative and then helping the team to navigate theirs is really where all of it starts.
Mm.
Yeah. Then once you
So,
do that, there's some other things that you can do.
wow, I'm fascinated by that one. I recall back in my days doing adventure course facilitation and group facilitation, we had a process called Johari's window. I don't know if you're familiar with Johari's window,
Not
but
by that name, but I love those kinds of things. I have a background with some of that too, so I'm curious.
yeah, I mean, it's really all about making the unknown known and making, like, how do we come to a shared mental model of what's really going on? And you're talking here about how do we get out there the narratives so we can talk about them and realize, like you said, we're not alone. And I think one of the reasons I'm so kind of attracted to your work and that we kind of resonate with each other is, for us, we do a lot with compassion, but we really talk about struggling with. And it starts with just disclosing, what are we struggling with? How can we struggle with each other if we're not open about what we're struggling with? And it sounds like early on in your process, some of those steps are really being, let's talk about these things and get them out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it continues from there because one of the things that we'll hear from leaders when we're talking about getting ideas and so forth is people say, wait, I don't need any more ideas. I got
I already
ideas
have a
coming out of my
bunch.
ears from all these people and they're useless and they don't understand. Well, if that's the case, knowing what you're struggling with is vital because you want to share that. And if you can create clarity around where you really need great ideas. Hey, listen, folks, I know we've all got ideas about how we can acquire customers, how we can improve our products. Right now, our number one strategic goal and where we're putting the majority of our energy as an organization is in customer retention. We want to do everything we can to keep the customers we've got in this environment. Then in 6 months or a year, we'll move on to the other things. But right now, that's where we need great ideas. So if you've got an
Mhm.
idea that's going to help us to retain our customers, please come and share that with it. So when you
Yeah.
create that kind of clarity coming out of the struggle and where you most need ideas, that helps everybody. But
Yeah.
that takes vulnerability as a leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It does.
Well, I want to ask your advice on something, and maybe one of your other steps can help. So, one of the conversations our team was just having yesterday is when we're working on things and we're brainstorming and trying to come with solutions, sometimes we maybe just have a gut instinct, like I just have my gut's telling me there's something missing here. I'm not sure why that's going to work. And I'm not trying to be devil's advocate. There's just something I am concerned about, but there's kind of this prevailing assumption that unless you have some logical, rational argument and reason for your concern, you better not bring it up unless you can defend it. And I think I probably, as a leader, perpetuate that because I tend to be really rational with my stuff. And so my sense is that I probably make it unsafe for somebody to just say, my gut's telling me blah, blah, blah. What advice do you have for me to welcome those concerns, even if there's not a logical explanation behind it? How can I learn from that?
It's a fascinating question, and I'm my first response is I'm thinking of this great book that's coming out called "Seeing People Through," that talks about all the different ways that people process and are wired, and that we all have inside of us. And so, anybody listening, if you don't get the joke,
Yeah,
that's Nate's book. So,
yeah. Practice
uh,
what I preach.
right, and so and I tend to be like you. I am analytic, and show me the data and help me understand that. And I want to understand the process that led to the conclusion and all of that. And uh, using your exact situation, Karen tends to be very intuitive.
Mm,
She's not a numbers person in terms of the spreadsheets and the math of it all and so forth. But intuitively, she knows when something's wrong.
mm,
She just does. It's a different way of knowing. And so I think for us analytical or logical types to recognize for ourselves that there are different ways of knowing.
mm.
And just because somebody can't do the numbers right immediately doesn't mean that they're not there to be found eventually. And
Yeah.
so and it's getting to know your people and understanding who you're talking to and so on. And if you have an Eeyore type who everything is seen through a gray fog and a gray
Yeah,
cloud, it's
yeah.
like, okay, I discount that. I I had a person on my team who tended to find a problem with everything, and their numbers basically any number they threw out, I had a algorithm that I just immediately cut it in half, and that was close to the actual number, right? So you get to know your people because they all have strengths. They're all bringing
Yeah.
things to the
Yeah. Yeah.
table, and have those conversations. So that's the first
Mm,
thing I say is just we have to be open that there are other ways of knowing, and um, inviting them into that conversation in a
yeah.
welcoming way about like, talk to me about what's bothering. Well, I'm just not sure. Well, how do you think you can find out? How do you think you
Yeah.
can look? What should we be looking for that would, and if it's somebody who has a track record of being right, then we probably want to follow
Yeah.
those instincts.
You're you're kind of role playing something here. I'm curious if this might be related to any of the other steps. You right now with me, you are role playing being curious. Like just be curious, open to what might they be wanting, what might be behind that, where could we find the numbers to back it up, or whatever that is. Um, I know we can't get into all 7 of the steps, but are there maybe one or two others you'd be willing to highlight just to kind of get us really excited about this?
Absolutely. In fact, the one that is coming up that you're talking about is called Cultivating Curiosity.
Mm,
And the day, as I mentioned earlier, like the day where a leader could have all the answers, right? That is so long gone. We live in too complex a world, and people have too much niche knowledge. And it's not your job as a leader to have all the answers, but you darn well better have some good questions, right?
mm,
And so that's what cultivating curiosity is all about. So, and again, it's not the open door that says, hey, you can come with ideas. It's, I'm going to intentionally be asking. And so, like, we talk about courageous questions. Those are an example of a way to cultivate curiosity. Courageous question is different from just, hey, how can we improve? It's specific and it's vulnerable.
mm,
So, examples of that specificity, like, what's the one thing that's going to sabotage this project if we don't address it? Well, that's specific, but it's also vulnerable because it acknowledges that improvement is possible.
mm,
Some other examples. What's one thing that's really frustrating our customers right now? We talked with a COO at a contact center who said, "Oh, I do that. About once a quarter, I ask all of our frontline employees, what's one of our policies that just sucks?" And he said, and I get them. I hear them because they're talking to the customers, so they know.
yeah, yeah.
And then we're able to process that and figure out how we can improve, right? So those are all examples. Right now in this time, we've got many leaders who hopefully are asking courageous questions. How can we create a more racially just workplace or diversely just workplace?
Mm,
What does that look like for us? What are your thoughts on that? And
mm,
so as we ask those kinds of questions, it makes it safe because it's vulnerable. We've assumed improvement is possible. We haven't said if there's something we can do. We know there's something we can do.
yeah,
What is that? And if somebody doesn't have something, they'll tell you, like, I think our database it's perfection. I can't tell you any way to improve it.
yeah.
I mean, they'll tell you if that's the case.
Well, you shared an irony very early about asking 2 different groups the same question and finding out that they actually, what's really going on. We we often ask groups, well, if we're working with a leader and their team, we'll often ask the team. So if your leader got vulnerable and maybe shared an insecurity or something they're struggling with and asked for your help, how would it affect the way you view them? And overwhelmingly, the employees say, I would love that. I mean, oh, yeah, we're in this together, asking for help. His street credibility would go up. But then
Yes.
we ask the leader, could you see yourself doing that? And they say, absolutely not. It would be weak. It would undermine my credibility. It would imply that I don't have the answers. So we're not all as evolved and courageous as you're asking us to be. But for a leader in that position who has been told you have to have the answers, you got to have this figured out. Don't show your cracks. What's the first step? What assurances or permissions or encouragements can you give to us to kind of make that first step?
When I'm talking with a leader like that, the first thing we want to do is grab a cup of coffee, like just and be real. Like to just let's talk about that because
Mm,
we don't live in that world.
yeah.
And the longer, I mean, just being frank, the longer you try to be that leader, the more stress you're going to experience, the more turmoil inside. It's going to pop out and leak out in other ways. It's going to affect your health. I mean, that's just impossible. And that kind of a strong facade, that's all it is. And it won't last forever. And some point reality catches up with you because you're never going to have all the answers.
Yeah.
I'm a smart guy. I like to research. I like to have all the answers. Sorry, it's impossible. There's an infinite amount of information out there that compounds every like 3 days or whatever the number is now. And there's no possibility that we can have our expertise, but what a great leader does, and this is the conversation, what a great leader does is not have all the answers and tell everybody what to do, is they facilitate bringing people together to figure out how to create a better tomorrow, a tomorrow that none of us could create individually.
Right. Right.
That's the essence of leadership. Right. So that takes curiosity. That takes cultivating that kind of team.
And there's a variety of more steps that are all part of that, I'm sure, in your book. Without going into all of those, I'm curious, you did a lot of research for this book. This is a culmination of experience that you've had. Was there anything, what was the most surprising discovery or truth or principle that is in your book that you didn't expect to find when you went into it?
There were a couple in the research. One of the things that came out in the data that made us both open our eyes and our research team go, wow, that's much higher than we would have thought. We asked respondents to say, if you had a great idea to share and chose not to share it, why would you not share it? And the most common response, like around 56%, said the reason I wouldn't share it is because I wouldn't get credit. Which we just found fascinating. And then as you start looking at people's lived experience, and I'm going to use something as recent as last week. This isn't quantitative research, but it's certainly an interesting sample size. So we wrote an article that was in Fast Company, and we've shared it around the internet. And on LinkedIn, it gets, the CHROs are like, yeah, so forth. We also shared it on Facebook. All right. Everybody knows, LinkedIn is like the business meeting. Facebook's the backyard barbecue. And on Facebook, the comments that came in, there is a stream of cynicism, of lived negative experiences. Why don't people speak up? Well, I'm never going to speak up because I'll get fired. Because it's the job market right now is horrible. They don't pay me enough for my ideas. They pay me for my work. They want ideas. They got to pay me more for that.
Wow.
Right. So, so then you're like, okay, well, who are these folks? Well, in Facebook, you can go and look. They're professionals, architects, engineers. I mean, like a wide range of educated, smart people who are feeling that way. And so, and that's variations on I'm not going to get credit, or I'm going to be punished. And we've certainly encountered that in some of the research interviews that we did, where we talked to folks who bright folks who were hired because they're really good at what they do. And within 3 months of being in a new organization, they'd find a process improvement, take it to their boss, and the boss would say something like, to somebody you're paying high 6-figure salaries, yeah, I didn't hire you for your ideas, just do what I asked you to do. And, and in this day and age, it's still shocking that on some level, it's still shocking that happens. But then again, it isn't. When I look at my own experiences as a leader, even to this day, where I've got an image of what I want to have happen and so forth, and I haven't done a good enough job of translating that. And somebody can come up with an idea and say, well, David, what if we did this? I'm like, you don't get it. Well, they're not getting it's my responsibility as a leader. I got to take responsibility for my communication.
Yeah. Well, that I'm reminded of the work we do around personality types. Is there are 2 personality types that very much tend to rise in leadership, and they get promoted because of their technical skill, their knowledge, their problem-solving ability, and each of them is driven, or not driven, but is fueled by recognition of their work, their ideas, their commitments. So it's not like they need to be praised all day long, but they need to be acknowledged that ideas are work products. And when they say, just a pat on the back once in a while would sure be nice, what they're really saying is it's okay for someone to say, thank you for putting the work into thinking that through, or bringing an idea forward, or,
Bingo.
really appreciate that. So So help me reconcile this. Help me reconcile that what you're saying is that the best idea doesn't have to be mine with I need recognition for my idea.
Yeah.
How do we
So
do that?
absolutely, it's such an important thing. One of the steps that we talk about, probably the last one I'll share in depth here, but I think it's important. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about. Is you have to match curiosity, you have to match what you're hearing with how you respond to it. Because the worst thing in the world we can do is ask people for their ideas and then either ignore them, stay silent, or so. Practical example. We were working with a large financial institution, and they did a really good job at cultivating curiosity. They had a robust suggestion system, high tech, and they were getting tons of ideas from there. I mean, the thousands of frontline employees. And talking to an executive, he said, "You know what's interesting is half of the ideas that we get are things we're already doing, have already been implemented." And we said, "Oh, well, gosh, your employees must feel really good about their contributions then." He said, "Yeah, you would think so, but our internal surveys, that's not what, we hear the same things that you're picking up. They don't take my idea seriously, whatnot." And we said, "So how are you going back and telling them that their idea is already being used?" And he said, "Oh, that's probably a good idea. We need to start doing that." Right. So what's happening to those people? They had an idea so good, it's already been implemented. They're thinking the right way, but then it goes dark. And now they're feeling, no one takes me seriously. My leaders are just stuck in their ways. They don't want to hear what I have to say. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So how do we respond? How do we respond to maintain that momentum, to keep that energy going? Well, there's 3 steps to responding with regard. And you said the first one, right? Start with gratitude. Even if you can't use the idea, you can still say, "Thank you so much. I really appreciate you thinking about how we could get better." So gratitude, then information, then invitation. The information is just add whatever information is missing. If the idea is already being used and they didn't know that, tell them where and how they can learn more. If their idea was misaligned with strategy, share the strategy. What's the data they're missing? What's the goal that we need to be focused on right now? And then invitation, which is invite them to keep thinking, to keep problem solving, to keep speaking up. And so that kind of seeing the person and recognizing the worth of what they did and the value of the behavior, even if you can't use it in that moment, will help you to continue that cycle of getting great ideas from them, because you've just refined that process. So, the worst thing you can do is, we tried that last year. Thanks, get back to work. Right? And you just shut them down. You're not going to hear another idea from them. When they tried, they took the initiative. That's you want that. So reinforce it and help them focus that to be more effective in their thinking.
I'm excited, and thank you. And I'm already have some ideas about an email I'm going to send after this, and our staff meeting on Friday, where I can do a better job at using your tips. I'm Thank you for helping us really understand this, what courage really means in this situation. And I've gained a new appreciation for it takes a lot of courage for the leader also to change their behavior and to do these things. But the steps you shared are practical, they seem doable, they seem like they would get immediate response from people. So we don't have to wonder whether this is really a good strategy. We'll know right away whether it's working. And for me, that's what makes a great leadership book is it's practical, but it's informed by the research, and it helps any one of us start wherever we are and take that next step.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this book.
Well, that is always our hope. Any work that we do is, and so when you get the book, there's an executive strategy guide that's a free download that goes with it, and it walks you and your team through every step. So you can, as you said, very practically, what do we do today to build that and get there? And so we really encourage leaders, you can read it yourself, but even better, read it with your team and walk through it together, so that they can see you,
Mm,
as you said, Nate, as they can see you wrestling with it, doing it yourself, and then drawing them into that journey with you. It's
yeah.
a really powerful dynamic.
So where people that are interested in learning more or getting your book, where would you direct them?
The best place to go, you can get it anywhere, whatever your favorite book retailer, but you can learn more, and there's a whole associated set of downloads and self-assessment quiz, all that sort of thing at courageousculturesbook.com.
Courageousculturesbook.com. And Karen, I know, is a big part of your of this dynamic duo. We were talking a little bit about the different roles here before this, so appreciate her contribution and her part of all of this as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Not as much as I do.
Yeah, you appreciate, well, thank you again. And I so appreciate you giving your time and sharing a little bit about your book. This is a huge resource and so important right now, more than ever. As leaders are working remotely, we need great ideas, we need courageous teams, we need cultures that create the future, because something else can automate the past.
I just love that. That's such a great phrase. It's exactly right. You know, we're dealing with 100-year economy, a pandemic, racial equity, global racial equity, but there is so much going on right now. We need every idea we can get. And so why wouldn't we as a leader tap into that wisdom and experience of every single person on our team?
I'm with you. David Dye, Courageous Cultures.
Thank you, Nate.